These guys know, and anybody that wants to come into our building, if you want to know what we're about cutting it loose. We're going to be aggressive, and we don't cower from anybody. We respect all of our opponents, but we don't fear any of them. And so if you want to come to Detroit, you're going to be gritty, and you're going to be with a bunch of guys that freaking love the game. They're going to give all their heart and soul, and we're going to cut it loose.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here with some Detroit Lions news to discuss. It's Combine Week, and because of that, the Lions were at the Combine, so we got to hear from Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, and they gave us a lot of little nuggets to dive into. They gave us a lot of information today, and we have a lot to discuss, whether that's the offensive side of the ball, defensive scheme changes, coaching promotions, just a ton of things to discuss. So let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
And welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And we're back with some Detroit Lions news. How's everybody doing today? I'm excited to be back. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I know there is a lot of information that we are going to cover in today's video. Because initially, when I started taking my notes on this, I thought it was like one thing. So I'm taking my notes, and then I realized, oh, we heard from everybody. There's a lot more than just this. So I'll try to keep this as condensed as possible, but at the same time, I do want to give you guys the information that I've heard as of today. And I'm sure there'll be more videos like this very soon, because I'll probably hear more news and things like that I have to discuss. So let's talk about the Lions offensive side of the ball first, and then we'll get into the defensive side. I actually have much more notes for the defensive side. I spent a lot more time on that, but there is a couple of things to take away from what they said about the offensive side of the ball, specifically Ben Johnson and his self-scout of the Lions offense last season, also Brad Holmes, and where they may be looking to add some help this offseason. And plus, there is a coaching update on the offensive side of the ball as well, now that Ben Johnson is the offensive coordinator, because, of course, that means that the tight end coach position is open. Well, that has been filled. Now, I do want to throw this in here real quickly. Dan Campbell has still not made his decision yet whether or not he's going to be calling plays for the Lions next season. He says that will be determined between now and week 1. Okay, I'm sure it'll be before week 1, but he has not made that decision yet. Clearly, he's in no rush to make that decision, so that's just something I thought I would throw out there. However, the Lions have a coaching update on this side of the ball, and that is that they have a new tight ends coach now. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm pretty sure. Tanner Engstrand. I think I'm saying it right. This is now their new tight ends coach, that Ben Johnson has become the Lions offensive coordinator. Now, Tanner Engstrand was here with the Detroit Lions last season. His most recent job outside of the Detroit Lions, he was an XFL offensive coordinator for the DC Defenders. For us last season, he was our offensive quality control coach. He also has spent time with Michigan in the past as an offensive analyst. He's also been an offensive coordinator for the University of San Diego. He was an assistant head coach there. He was also a quarterbacks coach there. So he's kind of been all around. And now he is the Detroit Lions tight end coach to fill in the role that has been left by Ben Johnson now as our offensive coordinator. So I want to start with that first. And now let's get into what Ben Johnson had to say about this Detroit Lions offense. Been watching a lot of the Lions game from this past year. Started off with me trying to watch Tracy Walker film, and because I was going to do a video on Tracy Walker as a free agent. I've watched so much of Tracy Walker recently, it's nuts. But then I started just diving into the Lions offense a little bit, because of course, you know, you watch the Game Pass and it switches to offense, and for some reason I can't skip past it, so I'm stuck there. I'm watching the offense, and then I'm taking notes like, well, this looks much better as you get further into the season. Well, here's what Ben Johnson said about the Lions offense. The first thing that he noted, at least according from where I got this information from, the first thing that he brought up was the Lions offensive line, saying that, you know, that's the strength of the team. We can dominate on the offensive line. We can, of course, move other teams, including the depth, and he said it's, you know, it's a spot that we can build on for the run game. So the offensive line is something that he brought up instantly. And when you look at the Lions, they're pretty close to being complete here, with a couple of guys that, you know, are going to be free agents that they could bring back. That includes your backup center, Evan Brown. You know, you have Tommy Kramer, who you can easily bring back. You also have Logan Stenberg in that mix. You have your starters pretty much locked up. Don't expect Terrell Crosby to be back, because that just kind of got ugly. Also a possible backup offensive tackle addition to the mix. And Matt Nelson, he's also an exclusive rights free agent, so he's another guy you can bring back pretty darn cheap. The point is that the Lions offensive line is pretty close to being complete, and you got to hope. I mean, they always thought is, well, they're going to develop and get better. That's not always the case, but you hope that these guys continue to improve. And specifically, once Dan Campbell took over the play calling right after the bye week, I mean, the first 2 weeks, one because Goff was injured and the weather wasn't very good, and the second one with Tim Boyle, but the Lions ran the ball like crazy, and they ran the ball much better in the second half of the season. So that is something to be excited about. I mean, it is one of my small questions heading into next season with the Lions offensive play calling is the run game side of things, because I know Ben Johnson helped us a ton in the pass game, but you still did have Anthony Lynn there. I understand we have Deuce Staley. We'll see if they make another coaching hiring. Actually, speaking of coaching hirings, Dan Campbell said that there was another coaching hiring that they are maybe looking to bring in. Maybe Dan Campbell has his eye on some run game coordinator that could possibly help out a little bit in that category. Maybe it's something else. He didn't really specify what that could be if the Lions do make another coaching hiring, but apparently one could be coming at some point for the Lions. Maybe it's Sean Payton. Who knows? Maybe Sean Payton. No, probably not. Okay, I'm not going to get my hopes up for that. Could be another hiring for the Detroit Lions soon. He just didn't really specify what that would be because, of course, that hasn't been made yet. But with the Lions' offensive side of the ball, he brought up the offensive line immediately. He also talked about some good and the bad. Starting with the pass game, some of the good there, he liked the efficiency, and we saw Lions' efficiency numbers definitely shoot up. We had some games in there where the Lions were playing really good brand of football offensively, very complimentary brand of football. You always talk about, the offense and defense complementing each other, but the Lions, for some of those really good games, including Arizona, even to somewhat of an extent Chicago, really, but beat us against Chicago, which frustrated the heck out of me watching it back, because I'm like, man, we beat the Vikings, we beat the Packers, and I'm watching the Bears games. All right, the first one was just awful turnovers in the red zone, but the second half of the season, we lost 16-14. I was at that game, and man, the flags on top of flags on top of flags. It was frustrating to watch back because I kind of forgot what happened in that game. But you have one drive that's killed when you're on like the opponent's 30-yard line because you have flag. And then you get it again, and then you have a first down, you get flag back up, and then you punt. Flags were killing us. And that's something that I didn't see him bring up, but maybe it's something that he should have brought up. That definitely needs to be cleaned up. But he did like the efficiency, and there was some very efficient passing games in there. The Arizona game was very efficient. The Green Bay Packers game, 21 for 30, 2 touchdowns, no picks. The Bears game was very efficient. There were some very efficient games in there, especially all the ones that we won. Goff was the offensive player of the week, right? I mean, he did have that ugly interception there, but the efficiency was much better, and you saw the Lions have some success. It felt like they were kind of puzzling together after watching it back. We may dive into this more specifically, but it felt like they were kind of puzzling together what actually, is the best for the players that they had, what was best for this offense, what was best for Goff, as Ben Johnson, worked his way as much more of a bigger piece in the Lions passing game throughout the second half of the season. The Lions tried some different things. You did see a lot of success attacking the middle of the field. Some I took away, but that was Khalif Raymond lined up at the slot. We obviously saw the movement of Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that became huge. Lions had a couple of nice route patterns in there. It felt like the offense, it wasn't perfect immediately, but as the season went on, and as you got really to that Green Bay game, I felt like just watching it back, the amount of confidence Goff had throwing some of those passes, honestly, at the highest we saw the season, which is promising because, okay, you want to end on a high note. And I get it. Well, they didn't play Aaron Rodgers and things like that, but it's just the confidence to know where the ball is supposed to go. And we saw some of that in Arizona, things like that. But by week 18, I mean, the movement he was having, setting up certain routes, he knew where things were going to be at a much higher level. He played much more confident in that game than I've seen, especially in the first half of the season, which is something to be optimistic about. But the Lions did have success attacking the seams, really nice option routes. They did some really nice stack situations with receivers and tight ends for creating mismatches. They were exploiting zones. So there was a lot to really like with the passing game as the season went on. But there was still some things there yet to be desired. And he talked about the explosiveness in the pass game. And I think this is something we of course heard Dan Campbell bring this up because he wants to be a team that can run the ball and then be explosive in the pass game. We know Brad Holmes brought this up. And then Ben Johnson brings it up. The explosiveness was lacking in the pass game in terms of, just yards per attempt was still lacking. It definitely improved in the second half of the season. The numbers tell that. Okay, we know Goff's stats improved big time, but it still wasn't where they wanted to be. Apparently, they believe they can improve on a lot of that with help at the outside receiver position. Getting help outside the numbers is how they said it. Here's a quote from Ben Johnson. He said this. He said, "We feel like we attack the middle of the field really well. The more we can expand both vertically and horizontally outside the numbers and deep down the field, that's going to make those guys in the inside that much more dangerous." And we know Lions have some pieces there. You got your Hawkinsons, the Swifts, and the St. Brown. He became such a big piece over the middle of the field. Immediately comes to mind when I think about this is like, just think about how much Josh Reynolds may get paid this offseason, either from us or someone else, right? I mean, I'll be sort of generous. I don't know where his contract's going to land. Let's say he gets, about $3 million a year. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I don't know. Some people are saying league minimum for this guy. Let's say he gets like $3 million a year. Your top X receiver may get that kind of payday. And just think about how much our offense improved with the addition of Josh Reynolds. Not just because of what Josh Reynolds did when the passes were thrown his way, but also what he was able to help open up for this Lions offense offensively. And of course, the trust that Goff had in him and some of the passes that he made, some of the big catches that he had for us. Again, it wasn't all perfect, right? But I mean, just think about that. Now picture adding a possible first round talent on the outside, whether that's with or without Josh Reynolds. Picture adding someone like that to the outside. Maybe a big free agent. I don't expect that. Maybe, a first round talent at receiver. Now you're really cooking, right? Now you got something. And the way that Ben Johnson hit on it, I think a lot of us expect that's going to be something the Lions attack in this draft. I could definitely see it being their second first round pick. I don't really see it being their 2 pick. Maybe they look to trade up. I mean, you never know, they could if they like someone a lot. Maybe they're saying like, dang, Jamison Williams is so fast. He can stretch the field. His stop and start's incredible. Let's go get that guy. Maybe they can scoop him up. They could trade up and go get him. They would have the ability to do something like that. Or if they trade back at 2, they could do it as well. I know that's a shocker. You're probably like, what? Are you serious? We're going to add a receiver? That's what I would expect the Lions to do that. And I don't think they're holding back. Maybe this is all smokescreen, but I'm going to believe that they're telling the truth here. Also, another part that Ben Johnson brought up about this offense was what the Lions did in the red zone and on third downs, which specifically, as he put it, was terrible. Okay, it's actually something I dove into yesterday. I was looking at the numbers of this because I was like, man, how much did the Lions' third down efficiency improve with, the new play calling in the second half of the season with some of these new additions? I mean, it had to get a lot better, right? And I go through the numbers and I'm like, really, we were still terrible. Some good games in there. We did, even with Boyle, we had some good games. But as a whole, in the second half of the season, I believe it was like 36% of third downs we converted. Big issue for especially earlier in the year was flags, getting ourselves into third and long. Those were big problems. And we did better, but it was like 36% in the second half of the season versus like 34% in the first half of the season. It was still terrible. So Ben Johnson put it perfectly. It was still bad. And flags are one thing you got to avoid. Another big issue, especially in the first half season, was that anytime the Lions got in third and long, it was usually a draw or a screen because they couldn't pass protect. Also, they definitely did not trust their outside weapons, which is why literally everybody on the staff is talking about improving the outside receiver position. All right, they all know what the issue is. They all know where they need some help and expect the Lions to address that. But also in the red zone, and Ben Johnson said this, think about it. When we get down there in the red zone, the size matchups make a huge difference. That was another thing we brought up. How many times do we really throw it outside the numbers when we got down there tight and probably was below league average? That's something we need to look at and to explore. So the rushing efficiency, it dropped as well because the Lions ran the ball, well as a whole. It's really good for a Lions rushing attack that what I've seen in my lifetime is the best one I've ever seen. However, the efficiency did drop in the red zone. And we know things get tighter, safeties come down a little bit, the field gets condensed, so it can be a little bit tougher to run. That also can be improved with, play calling, getting guys in the right position to be successful. Also, a lot of that can be opened up with the pass attack. And that's something that, again, they pointed out is something the Lions missed. I mean, just think about how we entered the season, right? We begin against San Fran. Our first red zone touchdown is what? Hockenson one-on-one, and you throw it one-on-one to Hockenson. We didn't always have Hockenson this season, which hurt us in the red zone at times. But a lot of times when we were looking to hit something in the end zone, it was a lot of times pointed to TJ Hockenson and trying to get a matchup in there. But that's the focus of every team was TJ Hockenson. And the way that Ben Johnson put it, having some more size on the outside could benefit us. I mean, Cephas is cool. He's a strong receiver. He can attack the middle of the field. He'll take some hits. He was great when he stepped in, and he helped us a lot. Then we lost him. Josh Reynolds, he started to become a much bigger target in the red zone for us. Was almost picked off against Green Bay, but it was like, hey, you got your one-on-one, let's throw that. And that's what you're looking for in the red zone. A lot of times just matchups. And the Lions didn't feel like they had matchups that they could win with. I mean, they had to be very creative at times to score when they got that close to the goal line. I mean, I think about the Green Bay game, the St. Brown touchdown, right? You kind of think that he's going to continue to cross the middle of the field and he cuts back a small little hole. Things like that. Lions had to be super creative because they didn't really have a guy that they felt like, oh yeah, he's going to win one-on-one. And what I've noticed about Goff is a lot of times when he passes the football, he tries to do a good job of not throwing it at the receiver, but picking a spot. And that's huge in the red zone. It's just, this is a spot, this is where the ball's going, go make a play on it. And some of the throws he was making in there, he wasn't even giving his guy a chance. But I think you put in a receiver on the outside, maybe 2, who knows, that you feel like maybe can win some fade routes, that can take at least some attentions off Hawk, open him up, just get matchups that at least has a threat. Maybe backs teams off a little bit to open up the run game. That's going to be huge. So that's another part that they brought up as well, is having an outside receiver that could help them a little bit, having an X that can win one-on-one coverage. The Lions will be able to do that in this year's draft at least. They also could do it in free agency, of course. I'm a little bit concerned about that, especially after watching a lot of these free agents. I'm going into Allen Robinson next. I really want to see. If one of these guys sticks out to me, I'm going to do a video on it. Just haven't had one yet that I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. Like, I just haven't found that yet. But there is guys in this draft. I mean, my mock offseason, if you haven't checked it out, you definitely should. I took Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, 4th round pick. I don't know how far he's going to fall, but he's a red zone target. He can play big slot. You can just throw it up to him. He's going to win 50-50 balls. And it's just like that trust that you have that, yeah, I'm just going to throw it up to you because you're 101. I think it comes in a number of shapes and forms, but I think the definition of it is really a guy who can consistently win 1-on-1, whether that's a big guy with a lot of strength and size, or whether that's a guy with elite quickness and speed. I think it comes in a number of different ways, but that's what we're looking for. Someone outside the numbers predominantly who can win 1-on-1. And if he's good at his job, dictates coverage, is at all times, and they start rolling his way, which will open up the run game for us and everything else inside. That's really what we want, because the Lions did have a lot of success attacking in between the numbers. There just wasn't a lot outside of that. I mean, Khalif Raymond found success in there, St. Brown. The guys found success. Hawkinson, running backs, we just didn't find tons of success on the outside. And a lot of times we didn't even do tons of designs to get it to the outside, right? Even with questionable pass protection, you would probably do more, shots to the outside on, 3rd and 10 than we did. We just didn't have that guy. We felt like, oh, let's just put it up there. We can trust it. And it was evident because after losing Cephas, then you went to Benson and Hodge, and we're just like, Geronimo Allison, let's give him a shot too. It's like, okay, clearly we don't know what we have here. You get Tom Kennedy can't go win 1-on-1 on the outside. He's cool, but that's not what he is. So you didn't have that. Lions try to find it. They couldn't find it. Hopefully this offseason they address that. And look, don't put it past Brad Holmes. He will address this. I'll tell you right now. All right, lock it in if you want to. Brad Holmes will address the receiver position. Now, let's talk about this defensive side of the ball, because this is where things got really interesting today. And as soon as I saw this, I immediately jumped on it and was like, okay, this is the video for today. It's not about Tracy Walker. It's not about Allen Robinson. It's about this. And this is what I immediately jumped on. Of course, we expanded it a little bit to the offense side of the ball as well. But it was about the schematic change that we're going to be seeing for the Lions defense heading into next season. Now, some people are going to be here, so like, yes, this is my favorite defense. Like, okay, I get it. But the Lions apparently are going to be making some schematic changes to how they're going to do things defensively. The way that he kind of put it was last year, they had a lot of different guys in here, from Charles Harris, Julian Okwara, Austin Bryant. A lot of these guys they didn't bring in. They gave a monster deal to Romeo, so clearly they had a vision for him. But you had a lot of different pieces. Michael Brockers, the 2 rookies, Ali McNeil, Levi Onwuzurike. So you had a lot of different pieces, right? It was kind of a mixed bucket of pieces, and they were kind of trying to figure out, okay, where do these guys fit best? How can we make this thing successful? And last year, we saw a lot of the base 3-4s. That's how they came into the season. And you have a guy like Todd Wash talking about, well, we have to build a wall. We're going to have to 2-gap. We're going to have to be able to stop the run, things like that. And originally came in, the idea was Lions going to run a base 3-4. So you'd have Brockers, Levi Alim, that was kind of like the projection in their head. Also, Nick Williams was throwing at that as well. On your 3-4, that was your defensive line. Then an outside linebacker, we were pushing Trey Flowers and Romeo, which is not what they've done in the past. Romeo did it back in college. I also believe he went undrafted. And Trey Flowers, he's moved all over the place, but he was playing defensive end for us specifically. So that's what we were looking at heading into last season. But it wasn't like the Lions just, hey, this is all we're going to do all year. Like, there was, of course, mixing it up. And even with this, we'll get into it, I still think the Lions are going to be versatile in terms of their front, because you just have to be. You can't come out and run the same thing all the time. Plus, you have to adapt to injuries, the COVID list, who do you have healthy. There's points in the season where the Lions ran a 4-3 type of defense. We've seen the Lions run a base 4-3 this past year with 3 linebackers and 4 defensive linemen because of who they had. Outside linebackers were injured or they were on COVID. We missed a lot of Julian this year. Trey Flowers went down early. Of course, Romeo Okwara went down early. So we didn't have Austin Bryant every game. So there were games the Lions went to a 4-3 style. We saw it against Minnesota. Dan Campbell told us that they are going to be making some changes to how the Lions are going to be doing things schematically next season in terms of how they're going to line up. Said this, we're altering kind of what we do defensively. It'll be a little bit more 4-down lineman type, if you will. Certainly still 3-down odd front principles, but of course more 4-down linemen. So that's apparently the adjustment that the Lions are going to be making according to Dan Campbell. We'll dive into that more schematically in a second, but I do want to talk about some of the coaching moves that the Lions have made with this news, and that comes with the linebacker position. So the Lions, we know they moved on from Mark DeLone as their inside linebackers coach after 1 season. We did the video on that. So they had a spot open up to be an inside linebackers coach, and now the Detroit Lions have promoted Kelvin Shepard, who was their outside linebackers coach last season when the Lions were running this 3-4 base defense coming into the year, to their inside linebackers coach. Mark DeLone, Dan Campbell pointed to, of course, the improvement that the linebackers had moving on from Mark DeLone, and then also the chemistry as well. But I think what's nice about this is Kelvin Shepard, he was a inside linebacker. This is something we brought up, actually, when we were talking about Mark DeLone being moved on from the Detroit Lions. This could allow Kelvin Sheppard to be put in this position. I didn't know it would be because of this front change, but it makes a lot of sense. Kelvin Sheppard played this spot. Plus, at the same time, he did a really nice job with the outside linebackers, like a really good job. Charles Harris having a career season. Juno Quora improved big time. Austin Bryant got going a little bit. You even saw a guy like Jesse Lemonnier come on at the end of the season. He did a real nice job with the guys that he had to work with. I mean, a career season for Charles Harris, and he also has a background of working with LSU, player development, and that was a lot of, off this field work, kind of things like that. So he relates to the players well, and now he's, I guess, promoted. Yeah, we'll say promoted to an inside linebacker's job with the Lions taking over that role, which allows Todd Wash to take over the entire defensive line role. Let's start off with the coaching side first and how this affects the Lions coaching. First off, with the defensive line, I think this is actually very beneficial for a guy like Todd Wash. Todd Wash has seen it all, as a defensive coach, and I was very pumped when we hired him. He had a very good background. He's done a lot of good work. I mean, this guy's been coaching for so long, whether that's with the Bucks, Seattle, recently with the Jacksonville Jaguars as their defensive coordinator for a few years, and when they went to the AFC Championship. I mean, he has done a lot, but he has always usually been a part of a 4-down defensive lineman defense. That's what he's been a part of. So it was a little bit different when we hired Todd Wash here, and we were like, okay, we're going to base 3-4. Definitely thought it could work because some of the principles were similar. I mean, remember what they said when we ran to 3-4? He said 3 things you're looking for. Obviously, the ability to set the edge, get after the quarterback, and show some ability to drop into coverage. That's what you had to be able to do. He's always dropped his defensive lineman, even in 4-down lineman sets. I think a lot of times you think of it and you're like, well, he's already in the dirt, so he can't drop into coverage. Don't tell that to Todd Wash because he's done that. I remember diving into this. I'm not going to go deep into it again because we've already hired him. If you want to go back and check out my old video when we hired Todd Wash to really see what I'm saying, he did. But I think this helps Todd Wash because this is what Todd Wash knows. I mean, this is what Todd Wash knows. Specifically recently with the Jacksonville Jaguars, based on the personnel they had, he came out and said, he's like, look, we are not built to play a 3-4 two-gapping style defensively. We're going to play 4-3, single high. We're going to get after the quarterback. And they drafted Josh Allen. A lot of people were like, oh, snap, they may be making that, change to 3-4. But like he came out and said, this is a double-digit type of sack guy. So Josh Allen played on the defensive line, and he ended up having a great season doing that. And guys that get after the quarterback, they can have explosive first step. Of course, there is still the part that you want to be able to two-gap, and there's always versatility within that. I think every team does both. We saw the Lions do both last season to build a wall. Sometimes you want to shoot gaps, though, and you want to get downhill. You want to shade technique a little bit. You want to get downhill. But to specifically talk about what Dan Campbell said and what that means for the Lions defensively is what I've really dove into. The more and more I dive into this, I'm really learning about this as much as I possibly can. I really started diving into this last year and trying to figure out what stuff means and how it works. And then I'm continuing this offseason even more, probably to another level this offseason. I'm super excited about that. The way that I interpret what Dan Campbell is talking about, saying, of course, 4-down lineman means you're running a 4-down lineman set. Okay, last season it was 3, and he had 2 outside linebackers in base, even though, of course, your base defense, which is like, okay, they come out, they have 2 receivers, 1 right. Like, that's not even seen that much. The Lions last season, 55% of their defensive plays were against 3 receivers. So a lot of times you're always in sub packages, but their base defense will be 4-down defensive linemen, according to Dan Campbell, a lot more of the time. I still, again, think they'll be versatile where you'll see some 3-4 looks. Sometimes you only see 2-down linemen. Sometimes you may even see only 1. I mean, the Lions are going to stay versatile with it because of certain pieces I think that they have, and just because you have to stay versatile with it. Of course, when it's on obvious pass down, everything goes out the window. You can do a ton of different craziness. Odd front principles. Now, with the odd front, of course, that's by the technique that these defensive linemen are playing. So, of course, when you're an odd front, it's, the 1-tech, 3-tech, 5-tech, 7-tech, 9-tech. It's the technique that these defensive linemen are playing. Think about it, right? A 1-tech, outside shoulder of the center. Easier situation to just shoot the gap because you're already lining up within your gap. So let's say he's shooting that A gap. You're already lined up in that gap, so you can just take that step forward and try to split the offensive lineman. Now, when you're 2-gapping, the difference there is that you're more to read and react. You see it a lot more with the 3-4 front. We saw that some from the Lions last season where you're holding your ground, you read and react to the play instead of just shooting upfield. In that base front and you're shooting gaps with your defensive line, that means linebackers are responsible for certain gaps along the offensive line as well. Versus if you have your defensive line that's 2-gapping across the board, you can keep your linebackers free because they can be responsible for 2 gaps. You just have to have guys that can hold 2 gaps. I mean, that's necessary that you have 2 guys that can do that. Outside shoulder of a guard, that'd be a 3 technique. 5 technique, outside shoulder of a tackle. All right, 7 technique would be kind kind of inside a tight end, 9 technique out wide. So it's outside shoulder, which could allow the Lions to much easier, a lot more one-gapping style next season. But at the same time, again, I expect the Lions to keep it mixed up, do some head-up things. So the 3 defensive lineman principles, that could kind of give you a little reason to believe that there still will be some 2-gapping in there, because usually when you're playing 3 down defensive linemen, like a 3-4 defense, you're asking your guys to 2-gap, and that can keep your linebackers more clean because they have the 2-gap responsibilities. I don't know exactly which way he's saying on this. I'm kind of just interpreting that this could mean more of the shading technique. However, I still think there probably could be both of this, and I guess we'll really know once they start signing guys and once they start drafting guys which type of players that they are bringing in. But I would definitely not count that out as being a thing that the Lions are still looking to possibly 2-gap, keep some of these guys free. And I think this also benefits a guy like Aaron Glenn, because Aaron Glenn, who came from New Orleans, of course he was part of a 3-4 when he played, but he's the guy most recently with New Orleans Saints that was in a defense that predominantly ran a 4-2-5 defensively. That was their defense. So they went 4 defensive linemen. They would have 2 inside line because of course your base package is basically your nickel package now. But theirs was the 4-2-5, 2 inside linebackers, 4 down defensive linemen, and then they'd have their 4 defensive backs plus an extra. Sometimes that was a safety, sometimes that was a corner. It'll also be something that he's familiar with. But the way that Dan Campbell puts it is he feels like it's the best for what they have. So it'll be a little bit heavier, but he thinks it fits our personnel. There's more flexibility there. Now, immediately when I started diving into this, the immediate thing that came to mind is, okay, why make this transition? A few reasons you can make the transition. Maybe there's someone you're like, hey, we're going to go get this guy. We feel like he fits better, and then we can kind of tie it all together. But I think you make this transition because you feel like you can be better with what you're doing. And immediately I thought, okay, who do the Lions have in-house that this could actually benefit based on what we saw last year? Because we've seen these guys play in 4-down defensive lineman roles. You saw in 2020. Well, how did they perform in this versus that? Immediately I dive into it, I'm thinking Romeo Quora and Levi. And then I read the quote when Dan Campbell says, Levi, the flexibility with Levi. He could play nose tackle. He could line up in a 3 technique like we just hit on. He could also play DN, which can be the 5 technique. I mean, of course, there's versatility there. You're not always lining up in the same spots. But so when I dive into this Lions personnel defensively and who they have defensively, I start to think to myself, well, who is this going to benefit personnel-wise for Lions? Immediately comes to mind Romeo Quora. Romeo Quora was signed for a 3-year, $39 million deal. Last year's cap, it was not very expensive, but it's $14.5 million for the next 2 seasons. Lions did get to see 4 games, not a completely full 4 games, but they did get to see 3 plus some of a 4th game of Romeo Quora to see how he played in the type of defense that they were trying to run. He immediately comes to mind as a guy that I think the Lions could be looking at and saying, well, maybe he'd benefit a little bit more from constantly being on a 4-down defensive lineman front with his hand in the dirt. Now, when you look at the Lions statistically, they have one of the least explosive pass rush edge positions in the National Football League. Combining Julian and Romeo and their explosiveness, how fast they get to the backfield, they are one of the slowest in the NFL. So that's also something that comes to mind because, like, okay, well, you're a lot closer to contact, much quicker to get there. You're playing that edge role. You have to have, of course, the athleticism to drop, which was a lot of people's question. And I think both of them could have done it because they did a little bit, but they could also think like, oh, this might help a little bit more because we could ask them to drop less, even though they still can do it. It's great to have that background because trust me, because the Lions are going to a 4-down lineman front will not mean that the Lions won't drop D linemen. I think they will, especially guys like Julian, because Julian was outstanding. He is so darn athletic. He looked like a linebacker sometimes. I was like, what? Julian, stop. They could be looking at Romeo, who had 31 pressures, 10 sacks in 2020, which led to the monster deal that he got. And he had good seasons before that. It led to this monster deal. And then we see him in the 4 games that he played, put up 1 sack, 6 pressures. Now, again, didn't play a lot, but those are the numbers that Romeo Quora put up. And he played almost every snap defensively for the Lions when he was playing. And that's the numbers that he put up. Now, who knows what he would have done for a whole season, right? I'm not going to say, it's not fair to just be like, well, he was terrible at this spot. But that would have been paced out to have 4 sacks, 4.5 sacks, and about 24, 25, somewhere in that range pressures, which would have been a dip from last year's production in 2020 where he had 10 sacks, 30 plus pressures. He was one of the top pass rushers in the National Football League. That's something that Lions stuck to because it's like, hey, we signed this guy. If we feel like he's best on the D-line, let's get his hand in there if we feel like that's where he's just going to be the best at. And he's put on weight since he's come out of the college as well. He came out at like 258, now he's like 271. So he's put on weight also to play this role. Some guys in his draft, the Lions pick, they may have to do that as well. We'll get to that in a second. So Levi immediately came to mind because you look at Levi last season, Levi's biggest strength coming out was his first step explosiveness. Yeah, sure, as the game went on, he's got to improve at, of course, his lower body strength. He needs to stay under the squat bar. That's how Todd Wash put it, and I'm sure he'll do that, especially when they go to some of the 2-gap reads defensively. That way he can hold his gap much better. He's got to consistently stay low on plays, but he did flash a few times. But his biggest strength coming out was that first step get off, which was just nasty from a guy that was 290 pounds. But like Dan Campbell said, it allows flexibility, more spots he can line up as. Last season for Lions, he wasn't going to really play nose tackle unless it was on a passing down, which he didn't do much at all. So there wasn't a ton of flexibility, plus he was on an injury. It was just a weird year for Levi last year. But there's more flexibility now. A guy that came out of the draft, he fits the 3-tech role, which is like the Aaron Donald role. Now he kind of can play that role. I think that's his best fit. The more flexibility to move these guys along the line with now 4 defensive linemen that they can play. Plus, if you're shading, it can be much easier for him to play a nose tackle role rather than trying to play heads up nose tackle because he just doesn't have the build to do that. Also, I think it can help Aleem too because he's another guy with a nice, quick first step. Same thing with Aleem, right? He was playing a 0-tech role in college, which is why he did what he did for the Lions because he can 2-gap like crazy. But he also didn't have the opportunity to be as many pass rush situations, and this could put him in more pass rush situations in this new role. So some of these guys can benefit, plus Michael Brockers, I view him as a guy that can play 3-tech, 5-tech. We saw him with the Rams play 3 and 5. He can play both those because of his length, good get off, more flexibility. Again, there we even saw him line up a nose tackle, but again, he doesn't have the build to not shade from nose tackle. In question I have with this, Julian, Austin Bryant, Charles Harris. Charles Harris, we know he's not under contract, but if he was brought back, Charles I think would fit in this because we saw a lot of his pass rush production come from having his hand in the dirt. He's not the fastest guy off the edge, and he had some strength last year, but he seemed to have a lot of production hand in the dirt as a defensive end. Now, he does much better wider. I don't know if there's tons of flexibility inside. So Julian Okwara, a lot of his production with his hand in the dirt last season. Coming out of Notre Dame, that's what he did. I know he was undersized at 250. He played 4-3 defensive end at 250 pounds. So outside linebacker fit him because you couldn't play him at the 3-4 defensive end. 4-3 defensive end may work. You may have to bulk up a little bit more, right? Because run defense still hasn't been great. Romeo's run defense wasn't great in 2020. One thing that was beneficial for Romeo when he switched outside linebacker was like, well, this should help him as a run defender. And it did. Biggest one, however, is Austin Bryant. Austin Bryant is on the final year of his deal, though. So, we don't even know if he's a future piece. But I thought he was much more successful when playing in a 2-point stance, being able to move around the defensive line. I didn't think he was great playing on the line. And I didn't think that when we made the change. I thought this could be great for Austin Bryant. Austin Bryant's the weird one. He's kind of been the weird one for the last few years. A lot of it is because of injuries. And you don't want to rely upon Austin Bryant because he just has missed a lot of times. And I know he is on the last year of his rookie deal. So he just may not get that much playing time this year and next year anyway. However, there could be a little interesting type of role that he could play. I mean, I don't think he's a 4-3 defensive end. You could try it. I mean, you could try to put him there and just use him for depth. I just don't see you getting much production from it. Maybe he continues to improve with this group and working with Todd Wash, though. Plus, if you're going to act in 2-gap, I definitely don't think that's going to work out. However, he could play an interesting role. Kind of what the Saints have done is they play their 4-3 defense. If they're not having an extra defensive back on the field, that third linebacker will kind of play like an extra rush end. That's what it kind of is with Zach Bond coming out of the draft, a guy that could get a lot of pass rush. He had 12.5 sacks, but he could also drop into coverage. Now, of course, Austin Bryant is much bigger than Zach Bond, so it'd be a little bit different, but maybe he could kind of play that role where he can line up next to a defensive end, kind of get wide where he's able to play very clean. He could kind of bump and press some zone coverage from the slot position, possibly rush off the edge, and help you a little bit as a run defender. It'd be weird because I don't know if you'd use this on early downs or if you use it on passing downs. I would honestly think you'd probably use it more on early downs, but maybe that's a little bit of a weird role that he could find himself in 2022 for the Lions if they're running, I'm just picturing in my head like a four-man defensive front. Maybe a role like that to try to find a way to put him on the field. I think Julian can play 4-3 defensive end. Julian could also probably play this role as well, but he would probably fit more on pass downs, less as the run defender. Julian, though, to me, can play 4-3 defensive end and be successful. I just don't see that being the case here for Austin Bryant. Since he brought up Levi specifically, kind of tells you where his head is at with all of this. Now, with the draft, I think it also changes things up a little bit. I won't spend too much time here, but think about this year's draft. Let's say the Lions want to take an edge at 2. We don't know what they're going to do. Again, have no idea because Hutchinson did play in a 4-3 defense. He did play a defensive end role up until last year when he broke out. The thing is with Hutchinson, who some people think will be the pick, I like Hutchinson a ton. I think he might be the best I think he's the best defense player in this draft as of right now. But I like Hutchinson a lot. The issue is he said on Pat McAfee's show, I prefer being an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. It helped me explode as a player. So maybe the Lions still believe it'll be fine. You don't want to draft a guy at 2 that feels like he's better for a 3-4 outside linebacker role and then squeeze him into a spot. You're like, I don't know if he works there. Now, Kayvon did play a stand-up role with Oregon, and he did play like a 3-4 defense, like a 3-4 outside linebacker. Still could add a little more weight because he's coming out reportedly at the same size that Romeo Core came out as at 258, 6'4". Still could put on more weight to help him as a run defender, but the elite get off, the length, he could play a 4-3 defensive end. So it makes it interesting. Of course, Brad Holmes will get to meet with Hutchinson and Kayvon, all these guys at the combine, and as Brad Holmes put it, to get the answers that they need. You know, he talked about how there's a lot of smoke around right now, but that's clearing up, and they're in a really good spot right now with, you know, the offseason. Originally, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, this does not look good for the potential drafting a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, because he prefers to play that 3-4 outside linebacker role, right, where he can stand up. That helped him thrive. So you don't want to like draft him and force him into a 4-3 defensive end role and be like, all right, this is what you're going to be, if he doesn't feel like he's at his best from that spot, especially with the second pick in the draft. However, when you take a look at what the Lions defense could look like, and I know we're super early into this, but seeing that the Saints ran the 4-2-5 style of defense that they did, and I could see the Lions taking some from that, there is ways that they could still make this work with a guy like Hutchinson. Of course, he's extremely talented, but also having him be very comfortable within the defense, not like putting him into a spot. You could always just put him in there and be like, hey, be a 4-3 DN. He'll still be great, allowing him to play very comfortable. So here's kind of a look at what the defense could look like. This is like a 4-2-5 type of defense. I just want to run through this real quick. So of course, you got your nose tackle. You can see him. He's shading to the outside shoulder of the center. It's Lee McNeil. It's John Pennicini. They could have had someone else to that mix. But in this 4-2-5 defense, these guys, you know, they're trying to take on both the guard and the center on that side. And we know Lee McNeil can two-gap. We know that John Pennicini has the ability to do that. And they can also shoot that gap as well, specifically Lee McNeil. So that would be his job a lot of times in this type of defense, is to take on both of those guys. Then next to him, you have your defensive end. Now, this is where I could see a guy like Michael Brockers. You know, I think he would be nice for 3 technical lineup out here. You could put Levi out here. Of course, if Trey Flowers, I put all the guys that were still on the roster. Trey Flowers could maybe fill in that. Bruce Hector, you know, one of those bigger body defensive ends, because then next to them, you could have kind of that third linebacker. And this is what the Saints did. It's like third edge rushing linebacker out there on some of their early base downs. And if you had one of these bigger body defensive ends, you could kind of put a guy like that to hopefully give you a little more pass rush upside, overload a little bit one side, you know, to hopefully get some more pass rush from that side of the field. But at the same time, on sub packages as well, so when passing downs, you could have this be a safety, you could have this be a cornerback, and this is just like one alignment. Like, there's tons of different alignments they could go with. But then on the flip side, you also have your 3 tech, which would be Levi, like he was coming out of the draft. Brockers can play that spot as well, but this is that spot that's supposed to be freed up. It's a one-on-one, right? You're one-on-one with the guard. This tackle took the center and the guard with him on the other side, so you're one-on-one with that guard. You got to get pass rush. You got to win those one-on-ones. That's why Levi was a high second-round pick. That's where he comes in, right there. And then next to that would be your other defensive end spot. But the thing is about a 4-2-5 defense is that you can be very versatile with this. Just because we're saying 4 down defensive linemen doesn't necessarily mean that he has to play with his hand in the dirt. And actually, a lot of defenses have done this, is they'll have their other defensive end play a stand-up type of role, and Hutchinson could play that type of role that has good speed, pass rush, but also has the ability to drop into coverage like we saw last year with Michigan, where he felt he was at his best. And that's where you could have a guy like that, or a guy like Romeo, or a guy like Julian, someone like that. And of course, you could flip this. So, you know, if you had, let's say you had Aiden Hutchinson, you could have Romeo on the opposite side. I would do that, have them both on the field at the same time. And, you know, your alignments will change. That's a very big part of this type of defense, because it's a lot about blitzing stunts. So having him stand up is a very big threat to offensive linemen. And Kayvon can play this kind of role too. That could stunt a lot of quickness inside linebackers blitz. You see it with the linebackers. Derek Barnes can blitz. You also have your will linebacker, who is usually known for coverage and blitzing in this type of defense. Safeties can come out and blitz. And we saw Lions do that a lot last season with Aaron Glenn. So it's a pretty aggressive style that you can play out of this. You have to be creative to have a guy like Aiden Hutchinson not play with his hand in the dirt, you know, especially on early downs. But you could probably do it. Maybe you can even put him into kind of that, like that Sam linebacker, you know, the third linebacker type of role, where he's kind of closer up on the line of scrimmage. He's playing free. You could kind of put him in that type of role, maybe early downs, and then, you know, other downs you have him playing the stand-up role. You want to move Aiden Hutchinson, a guy like that, all over the place. But I just don't think you want to put him in a role and be like, all right, 4-3 defensive end, hand the dirt, 3-point stance, go to work all the time. It's just not the best for him, and he doesn't feel as comfortable in that spot. Kayvon Thibodeaux, I'd say it's slightly trending towards that direction. I always had it in my back of my mind, the Lions could be more interested in this guy just because of his explosiveness and crazy athleticism. Lions like those guys. Just ask Levi or Aleem or our entire last year's draft class in the relative athletic scores. But then also starts to trend a little bit more towards, I think, a guy like Kyle Hamilton, where we could be at depth-wise heading into the draft. You wouldn't have to. I do believe the Lions need more pressure, and I think the Lions are looking at this as a way to not only help Levi, because I think this really can benefit the interior defensive line when you talk about rotation, gaps that they're going to be able to play. They need more pass rush, and I think the Lions have to continue to address that, and he can do that with the 2 pick. You know, I'd like to add another pass rusher, no matter who it is, with our top pick in this draft. But when you look at the Lions, right, Trey Flowers still under contract. This is coming back. I think based on what I saw last year with Trey Flowers sort of rotating early in the season, Romeo wasn't really rotating. He was sort of rotating, right? You see that. Definitely was not maybe the best suited to play outside linebacker. We know he's a good run defender. I love his effort. I will never question his effort because, man, he's running into plays. He had that strip against San Fran that kept us in the game. He's a really fun player to watch, but the injuries, the lack of production, I think that he's kind of on his way out. Not knowing for sure, but I think he's on his way out. Yes, he could fit in as a 4-3 defensive end. We know this, and he's versatile. But I just think he's on his way out, schematic change or not. Then you look at a guy like Charles Harris. Now, he's interesting because I think Charles Harris can play 4-3 defensive end. So what people thought of him coming out of the draft, and we saw some of his pass production this past year come from playing 4-3 defensive end. Really thrive as his ability to play in space against the run, drop into coverage. Really saw him thrive in those 2 areas this past year. Knowing he's not under contract and the Lions changing this up, Lions believe that this change is what's best for their players. And I think they're looking out for guys that they feel like are going to be, you know, long-term fits, like the Romeos and the Levis, to try to get the best out of those guys, right? And we know there's versatility within Michael Brockers, Levi, Aleem. They can all play all these different spots on the defensive line. I look at a guy like Charles Harris, and I think he could play 4-3 defensive end. But just like when, you know, before we knew this kind of news, it kind of is the same thing. It depends on what the price points hit, because I think he could play both schemes. I just can't see the Lions bringing back a guy like Trey Flowers, because let's say they use their top pick on defensive end, and then having Trey Flowers come back with a $23+ million cap hit and possibly be your backup. That would just be insane, because I think at that point, Romeo and that draft pick are probably your starting defensive ends projected. It's just be so much money to pay to one guy that just hasn't been healthy the last 2 seasons or productive enough for that kind of money. Now, Lions do have a lot of kind of under the radar guys in here that are still on the team, between your Jayshon Cornells, who is a defensive end / defensive tackle. I think he had more success actually in the interior with Ohio State, but that would be a scheme fit for him as well. We just haven't got to see him. Last season he was suspended. We barely saw him. You have a guy like Bruce Hector. You can see a scenario where you move on from Trey and you have a guy like Charles Harris, and you either bring him back. It just depends on his contract, right? If his contract does not get crazy, you bring him back to be a backup defensive end. If it does, then you hit the draft, and I think you draft at least 2 defensive ends. That could be your top pick and another one, and then you could probably grab another defensive tackle, an interior defensive line, whether that's through free agency or the draft, once again, to add to that. Versatility is key here. Julian Okwara, you got 1. You got Romeo Okwara, that's 2. Then you also could have your top draft pick, that'd give you 3. I think you could add another one to that mix to give you about 4, with Michael Brockers having that versatility. And Michael Brockers and Levi can rotate. You're always going to want to have that ability to rotate. I still would love to have Charles back, because we need depth. We need it bad, and we need pass rush. So any way we can get pass rush without losing it is great. And we need guys that can produce and stay on the field. They'll continue to draft that. They'll continue to address it in the draft. I still expect the Lions to run a lot of 2 inside linebacker sets like the Saints did, like a 4-2-5 defense. You're in your sub package so much now that you're not really playing 4-3 that much as you're playing a 4-2-5 defense. So I would still expect the Lions to have a lot of just 2 inside linebackers on the field. Derek will be the Mike, and you'll need a will linebacker. Maybe that's Jalen if he's brought back. Maybe that's Josh Woods. I don't know. I mean, your will is usually better in coverage, and he can blitz. So we saw Woods blitz a lot last year. Maybe it's Curtis Bolton. Maybe it's Buzzy Bolton out of Oklahoma. Probably that guy's not on the roster right now. But I do believe that Derek Barnes stays at Mike. But there's 2 things the Lions are probably going to look to add regardless that I think they'll look to add now, especially after making a change like this. Extra safety, which we all knew they were going to add, because 3 safety sets were normal for Saints when Aaron Glenn was there and last year. PJ Williams, Marcus Williams, and PJ Williams, Marcus Williams. That's funny how that works out. PJ Williams, Marcus Williams, and also having the other safety whose name is just slipping my mind right now. PJ Williams, Marcus Williams. Who's the other safety? Oh, Malcolm Jenkins. They had that 3 safety set going. And when Malcolm Jenkins would slide into the box, he'd play slot corner, things like that, because he's got a background of a cornerback. When he would do things like that, you had PJ Williams and Marcus Williams as your 2 deep safeties. So a third safety is very important, a guy that can slide into the box. If the Lions add another safety, let's say hypothetically they add a safety that can play out there, I believe Tracy Walker's coming back. He's got to come back, by the way. After diving into the film, the guy is improved so much. He is an awesome tackler, great run defender. He brings incredible energy. He's improved so much as a pass coverage guy. Still working, but got better throughout the year. Got to bring him back. I watched like 9 all 22 games of Vims in the last 2 days. Got to bring T-Walk back. But let's say you bring another safety with that to be, you know, across from him in a split coverage defensively. That could allow a guy like Will Harris possibly to be your third safety. You know, I mean, last year a lot of that was CJ Moore because you had Will Harris playing corner because of all the injuries, and you had Tracy Walker back, and then you had Dean Marlowe next to him, so you put CJ Moore in the box. That could be changed up a little bit, where next year maybe that's Will Harris in the box, who's done it, Tracy Walker back, and then a new addition at safety. But either way, I believe that some lines are going to address, some I wanted to point out. And also, of course, they need another linebacker because you will find some 4-3 lineman sets. Last year, it was usually Alex Anzalone at outside linebacker, Derek Barnes at middle linebacker, or Mike, and then your other outside linebacker was Jalen Reeves-Maben. Lions will need another linebacker to this. Now, it's interesting because we saw the Saints, they brought in a guy named Zach Vaughn out of Wisconsin. He was kind of interesting because he was a blitzer. He was more of an edge player that played a little bit off-ball linebacker, so it was kind of versatility. He could also drop into coverage. He hasn't played a ton with New Orleans, but that's kind of what their third linebacker has kind of been, you know, that ability to get up on the line, bring some pass rush off the edge, put 5 guys across the front. You can drop and play linebacker. You can do a little bit of coverage for us. Could open the door for some of these draft prospects that can blitz and drop into coverage. Be like a hybrid defensive back / linebacker. Whether that's a Rad's guy, JoJo Doman, diving in a little bit. He's more of like a star slot corner. Whether that's a Channing Tindall, you know, something like that can blitz a little bit, help you on the run, drop into coverage. Something like that could be a player that I think could see the Lions drafting now. I think a lot of it will be 2 inside linebacker sets, which they'll have to address. This doesn't have to be their top linebacker drafted, right? But 2 inside linebacker sets. I think they'll draft probably 2 linebackers anyway. 2 inside linebacker sets, and then you'll have that third one that's not always on the field. Maybe just your early down guy, and you have your third safety for pass downs, and you have your third linebacker for early downs, right? Where if you want him out there, he can help against the run, set the edge. He can also drop into coverage a little bit and blitz. You kind of get a nice trifecta of a guy that's not your normal off-ball linebacker, but he kind of just moves around. Finally, I want to end it off with some cornerback talk. So Jeff Okudah, Dan Campbell said that Jeff Okudah is a cornerback for them. He has not said that, oh yeah, we're moving to safety, because I know we did the video and we talked about it, whether that would work or not. So check out that video if you have not. And he was like, he's a cornerback for us. Of course, the options are always out there. You know, we could move into safety, should we move into nickel based on what we have, how he's coming along with the injury. The optimistic thing here is he believes that, and he hopes that Okudah and Romeo are on the path to being back by training camp. We've seen these awesome videos. Here's another daily dose of a great video of Jeff Okudah running, which looks great. I love to see it. So impressive with this is that, I mean, this is a ruptured Achilles that he's coming back from. This can take up to 9 months, right? I mean, it can take longer than that. And we see month 5, this guy's running. And then we see this post from Jeff Okudah. February was special, day 169. I don't know why I said February. I don't know why I said it like that. I'm sorry. Day 169, Coach Jay saying the comeback will be real. I love to see this. I mean, and I'm watching it like, he looks good. You can see how he's cutting in and out of breaks. You see some of the physicality working with some of the bumps there. You can see how low that he's sinking on some of these, right? And he's working it back. He's working it back. And man, this has to get you really hyped. The kind of work that this dude's putting in. He's locked in and trying to get back as fast as he can. And then Dan Campbell saying that they're hoping that both these guys can be back for summer workouts. Woo! Hey, I love it. I love Okudah's grinding. I love it. You knew he would. All right, you just knew he would. That's the kind of player that we got here, and I'm so pumped to see it, man. He's gonna come back stronger. He's gonna come back better. He hopes that those guys will both be back for training camp. So Okudah, Romeo Okwara, Okudah's on his way. I don't know where Romeo's at because he doesn't post videos of it, I don't think. But it is nice to see that Jeff Okudah is looking pretty good. And they view him as a corner. But they said, look, there's always flexibility, you know, depending on what we have, where we think he'd fit best. And another thing with Okudah, I feel like he's one of those guys, and I said in the video, like, if you told him, hey, we want to move you to safety, he wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not doing that. Like, he would do it, and he would try to be great at it. Because I think that's who he is, and you can see it by the way that he's working back. But I do end up, early prediction, I believe he'll be a corner next year, because I think this is something that you don't want to wait till like week 1 to be like, hey, we're moving you to safety, dude. You never practice it, but that's what you're doing. Like, that's not going to be good for him, especially if he's asked to come in and start. That's not going to be easy at all. It's very tough transition. It's not like, oh, you're bad at corner, so I'll put you at safety. It'll be easy. It's not easy. Just ask Malcolm Jenkins. The transition was not seamless, okay, at all. Really came along with Philly. So that'll be something to keep in mind, but I do believe as of now, with the Lions saying that, he'll be a cornerback next year. But yeah, there's always that flexibility that you want to have. But there's a lot of guys with flexibility, whether it's Will Harris, iffy. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can move around, play different spots if you need them to, whether it's nickel. Who knows? They're going to leave that up there because they may move him around and play different spots. But I think full-time, he'll come in as a cornerback next year, like Dan Campbell said. I just love to see the fact that he's running around and he's looking good. So that is your Detroit Lions news for the offense and defense side. I know this video probably went way longer than I thought it would, but that's okay. There's a lot of news to touch on. We had to hit on the news. So I'm going to leave it right there, man. Congratulations to the promotions for Kelvin Shepard and for our new tight ends coach, Tanner. I'm not even trying to say her last name because I already messed it up. I know that. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on line scheme changes. I know some people are pumped. 4-3, 4-3, we're doing it. I know, man. I know. Y'all are excited. And I think there's reasons to be. Lions aren't, locking themselves into a box. They're okay to look back and say, okay, maybe that wasn't the best. Maybe this guy's better here. Now we can learn from it. Last year was about what? Building the foundation. Now you built the foundation player-wise, but you've also built it in terms of, okay, maybe the guy fits better here. Let's put him back here because there's certain guys that are part of the future and you want to have them comfortable and fit well in this defense. And it's still why I think the Lions could like a guy like Logan Hall. I think a guy like Devontae Wyatt, someone with explosive get off. Look for that if you're looking for defensive linemen. That would be my advice. And look for guys with length. But now it really opens up the draft board big time for kind of anybody with length and explosiveness, I got to believe. Guy that can play 5 tech, 3 tech, knows that. I mean, there's flexibility there. It's exciting for me when I'm talking draft, but it's definitely going to shift some things a little bit. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.